Now I'm on. Thank you. We'll call the Audit and Compliance Committee meeting together. And the first thing on the agenda is the minutes of February 21st, 2018 committee meeting. I hope everyone's had a chance to review them. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes, please?
I so move.
Second.
Thank you, Regent Bates and Regent Dakovich. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Next, we have a state audit report, and I'll recognize our auditor of State of Iowa, Mary Mosman, and Deputy Auditor of State, Andy Nielsen, for a presentation on the state audit reports presented this month.
Well, good afternoon. Okay. Hello. It's a pleasure to join you today, and it's also a pleasure to be here at the Iowa School for the Deaf, so thank you for having us. On your agenda, item number 2 lists the various fiscal 17 reports that I'll talk about today, highlighting just a couple of things. The first 2 reports listed, the State of Iowa Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, or the CAFR, and the Single Audit Report. These are statewide audit reports, and they include financial information of the regents' institutions, as well as all the rest of state government operations. An unmodified opinion, which is the best opinion that an entity can receive, was issued on the state's CAFR. This means that the financial statements are fairly presented and present the position of the activities and major funds for fiscal 17. The single audit report addresses statewide compliance, including the regents' compliance with federal funding laws and regulations. For the regents, we found no instances of non-compliance regarding their portion of federal financial assistance monies. So the next 3 reports listed are the separate reports on each university and include both financial statements and internal control letters. For a board's perspective, there are 2 key things to note. Each university received an unmodified opinion on their standalone financial statements, which again means that their financial statements present fairly the financial position of the university. And for each university, nothing in our internal control report rose to the level of a material weakness. As is typical, my office will issue reports of recommendations either late spring or early summer as necessary if, in conducting our audit work, we became aware of certain aspects concerning a regent's institution's operations which we believe corrective action is necessary and for which you need to be aware of. But that will come out in between April and August. And the next 2 additional items that I'd like to mention this afternoon have to do with GASB statements, just for board awareness. The first item is a reminder that GASB 75 will be implemented by the regent institutions for fiscal 18. The university's statement of net position will include a liability for the university's OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits. And once implemented, the university's statements of net position will report the entire OPEB liability instead of the net OPEB liability, which is currently reported. This will be a significant liability for each university and for the regents and for the regent institutions because it covers all employees. This GASB parallels the recent pension reporting GASB, which was number 68, which impacted only the employees that were covered by IPERS. And the second item is a reminder of another GASB, GASB 87, which will be implemented by the regent institutions for fiscal year 21. Each university's financial statements will report capital assets and related liabilities for leases that are not currently reported. Each university's notes to the financial statements will also include information about the timing, significance, and the purpose of the university leasing arrangements. So with that, Andy and I would like to thank all of the regent employees as well as the university employees who work with our office. They are a professional group, and it's just a pleasure to work with them. At this time, we'll just take any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Any questions for Mary or Andy? That's how thorough it is. Thank you very much. We appreciate that, and we look forward to hearing more about the changes that may be coming up.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next, I'll recognize our Chief Audit Executive, Patrice Sayre, who is on the phone.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Patrice.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can. Yes, go ahead.
Great. Well, thank you for accommodating my need to take this by phone and not be there present. I sure apologize for that. Today we have 6 audits that were completed at our 3 universities. That's kind of a smaller number than maybe you're used to seeing, but I remind the board that we now are meeting every single time we have a board meeting, and projects ebb and flow as to when they are finished. At any given time, we have 14 staff auditors who are working on audits, and so while they're completing an audit or deep into an audit, they may be actually launching a new audit at the same time they are working on follow-up audits. Just very quickly, highlight a couple of the audits that are shown today. At the University of Iowa, they did a capital assets management. The University of Iowa has $3.8 billion in active capital assets. The generic definition of capital assets are things worth over $5,000 and with a usable life of more than 1 year. Because they have such a large inventory that they are tracking, they in fact use an outside inventory company, HCA Asset Management, to perform physical inventories for their on-site tagged assets. So some of the recommendations here had to do with the contract with that third-party vendor and the invoices, and asking for more details, more itemized invoices, more the process, not really the inventory itself, but the process of working together with an outside company. And again, they have made good audit recommendations, and the management is right on top of complying with those. They also have another finding dealing with asset custodians and contacts. One of the things that's important is that someone needs to be responsible for consistently recording, updating, validating where assets are and who's in control of them. And this audit finding really said that there was a need to make sure that the roles were more easily distinguished, more easily found. And again, management is right on top of making sure those contacts are going to be, for the most part, automated and readily in place. As always, when you are dealing with assets, it's important that asset tags be actually placed on the assets wherever it's possible. And again, there was a finding that said they were needing to update that and be a little more following up and being sure that they're standardizing and completing timely asset tagging. Also, some training and guidance needed to be done. There is not an overview training that's required, and they've not held some classes for a while, but the audit recommendation was that they should be offering something versus some online training. And again, management is complying with that. All in all, reported a very good audit. For the University of, for Iowa State University, we were looking at recreation services. This is a unit within the Division of Student Affairs, operates 4 indoor facilities and 8 outdoor facilities. And they were looking, one of the most significant discussions had to do with the assumption of risk, whether there was signage. Some students actually, some users of the rec services actually are required to sign waivers, but not everyone. So there was a concern about how do you make sure that you are mitigating your potential legal liabilities, and it was determined that if there was more consistent signage, regardless of whether somebody had to sign a waiver or not, that would help dispel that liability. So again, they've drafted some language to be put on signs, and management is in agreement with that, and they'll be doing that shortly. They also talked about access, user accounts in the RecTrack system. It wasn't quite often not tied to a specific user. Out of 45 active user accounts, 27 of them were generic shared accounts. So again, the importance of connecting who's in the system to a specific individual was a finding, and management has agreed that they will move to unique user accounts for each employee with the implementation of some new software in the spring. They had some concerns about non-capitalized equipment in this respect. Make sure still that you do have unique identifiers for inventory tracking purposes. You still want to know where your iPads are and various other equipment that may move from location to location, depending on what Rec Services needs. And Recreation Services did agree they would develop a process to track those non-capitalized equipments. There also was a need to be sure that conflict of interest and commitments disclosures were being made. Employees are required to submit conflict of interest and disclosure forms, and they were not being as consistently filled out as they needed to be. And again, Rec Services is going to establish a process to ensure that those disclosures are completed annually by all required employees. For the University of Northern Iowa, we also did a capital assets management process. This audit had some disclosures that some federal capital assets were not being accounted for properly, and of course that increases the risk for any kind of a federal non-compliance or perhaps penalties when those assets are reviewed. And so again, requirements for tagging those federal fixed assets, making sure your capitalization limits and labor associated with fixed assets were properly reported in the capital assets system. There was some need for capital asset and property policies and procedures to be updated or documented, and that increases the risk of improper handling and management of university property. So again, management has agreed that they will make sure that management policies are aligned, and whatever documentation and other needs are necessary will be reviewed and updated. There were some issues on monthly reconciliation and annual capital assets reports. They needed to be reviewed and approved for accuracy and completeness. And again, management is complying with that. There was a finding on capital asset additions, that there was some controls that needed to be in place to reduce errors, to increase the risk, to make sure there was not a high risk for unrecorded or improperly capitalized or incorrectly valued capital assets. And the auditor did suggest monthly capital asset transactions to be tracked with software and or Excel, and management is agreeing that that is a process that they need to be sure to evaluate and maximize the functionality of their systems. Also an issue on deletions and disposals. Sometimes the proper documentation was not in the system, talking about why something was disposed and making sure it was justified and approved with appropriate supporting documentation. Again, management has agreed that those things will all be aligned. Finally, there was an issue on asset tagging, as I had mentioned in the other one, how important it is to be sure that capital equipment does have tags secured and that we can track them more easily that way. There had been some changes in alignment. Some of the people who were working on capital assets, there had been some changeover, and a lot of this is simply because things had not really been as well, as smooth as it could have gone in that transition. So I feel this audit was a good audit in making sure that everyone was back in agreement on what needed to happen there. So those are the three audits I would mention. I also want to talk a little bit about audit follow-ups. We noted last month that there were several in the red, and I've been asked to update everyone on the ones that were listed there. These are all University of Iowa. Many of them have complex either software or models for financial arrangements being worked out. In the Heart and Vascular Center, they have been working on a new financial model and designing a funds flow agreement. That involves a number of different components in the center. I know that Ken Cates, Dr. Jackson, they're all working on this model, and they are close to having an agreement there. On the utilization management, we are waiting on an Epic Care Management module that's going to give the hospital the capacity to run productivity reports. This should be here, we believe, in April. Maybe by the end of this month, we should have that one closed. The University Bookstore is now closed. It was unfortunately not closed at the time that we had to submit these to the docket. But the issue that really kept this open was a course material adoption item. And what I think is quite marvelous about this one is that there are 3 bookstores operating in Iowa City, and a faculty member can turn their books requirement list into any one of those bookstores, which meant our students might have to go to 3 different places to find out where the book they needed for a specific course was located. This audit had recommended that there be a master list created so that a student went to one place but could find out which bookstore was carrying it. This is a great step forward in helping our students and being more efficient, and again, really making students the primary focus for us. The University of Iowa Health Systems Governance and Processes is also closed since our docket came out. This had to do with moving electronic medical records from the Iowa City Heart Center to Epic, the major software used by the hospital. The University of Iowa Healthcare Clinical Trial is still waiting for some centralized monitoring of the clinical trial balances, and that is, I know, definitely in process. It is not finished. The University of Iowa Health System Financial Management is waiting on billing verification for the health policy employees who provide services to the Health Alliance and ACO, and they are working on an action plan, and definitely that is in process. The UI Healthcare outreach had to do with cash handling procedures being improved, and there still is cardiology billing for the Dubuque Clinic is still manual, and they're hoping to move that to an electronic system. So just to update you on those past due audits, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Patrice. You took all the questions out of my list because I was going to ask about those and about the fact that they're red. Is that just basically because of their date? Because they're older?
Yes. If we do a target date with the auditee, and usually are very careful about trying to set dates that are reasonable. An audit may have 6 to 9 findings, and maybe one finding still keeps the audit open. We do keep in close touch with our auditees to check where they are, to work with them, and we test as frequently as we can to see if we can consider something closed. In these cases, there's usually something very complex that is keeping it still outstanding.
Thank you. For the rest of the board and rest of the committee, does anyone have any questions or comments? None at this time. Thanks, Patrice, for your report. We appreciate it. I'll talk to you
Very
soon.
good.
All right, next we have an external audits report, and the first one is on the Iowa Public Radio. So on the phone with us today is Roger Niemeyer from Niemeyer and Associates, the CPA firm that performed the audit of Iowa Public Radio for the fiscal years ended June 30th, 2017 and June 30th, 2016, as well as Kelly Edmister. She's the Director of Finance and Administration at IPR. Are you on the phone?
Yes, we are. Roger Niemeyer here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's see. We performed the audit of Iowa Public Radio for the years ended June 30th, 17 and 2016. I believe you've been provided an audit report. We issued our report dated November 29th, 2017. We gave an unmodified opinion and stated that the financial statements presented fairly in all material respects the net position of Iowa Public Radio as of June 30th, 2017 and 16. In addition, or in relation with that audit, we also performed an examination of the internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters based on an audit of financial statements performed in governmental auditing standards. That report is located at the end of the actual audit report of the financial statements. Our review or our audit of that particular thing did not identify any material weaknesses that came to our attention, and with respect to the compliance and other matters, our test did not identify any non-compliance with relation to the test being performed. I guess, is there any questions on the audit? If anybody has any, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments that they'd like to make to Roger? I was just curious, Roger, do you know how many employees they have by chance?
Iowa Public Radio itself has approximately 50 employees.
Okay. Thank you. If there aren't any
welcome.
other questions, then I want to thank you for your report.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
All right. Bye now.
Goodbye.
Also, we have the Quad Cities Graduate Study Center, and we have Carpentier, Mitchell, Goddard and Company conducted an audit of the Quad Cities Graduate Study Center for FY 2017. The audit concluded that the financial statements presented fairly. The auditors did identify a deficiency in internal control with respect to proper segregation of duties in areas of cash receipts and cash disbursements, which increases the possibility that errors or irregularities may occur and not be detected on a timely basis. So the center may not be able to fully achieve an ideal segregation of duties due to the small number of people employed in administrative functions. No instances of noncompliance or other matters were identified in their report, which we have here. Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding that after reading it? Good. Any other business to come before our committee meeting? If not, the Audit and Compliance Committee is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Dunkel. Is there any other business to come before the board? Hearing none, this meeting of the Iowa Board of Regents is adjourned.